Across the Flow FM network, a Flow News 24 update.
And here at the Flow News Desk, we turn to agriculture, and the South Australian grain producers have welcomed a much-needed change to fertiliser contracts. This is after the peak body in South Australia raised concern about that the fertiliser contracts with the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. The ACCC last week announced that suppliers in the fertiliser industry have agreed to amend their contracts following an investigation into unfair contract terms. The response to fertiliser supply complaints for some grain producers in South Australia, the GPSA raised concerns with its Chief Executive Officer Brad Perry, who said feedback over the past few seasons exposed that there is concern and that they're thankful that the ACCC investigated the unfair contract terms, and some of the potentially unfair terms identified by the ACCC included giving the supplier the right to unilaterally vary the quality to be delivered to the buyer or to terminate the agreement if the supplier believed it would not be able to supply the goods. Some terms restricted buyers' rights to raise issues about defects with the goods. Under the new unfair contract term laws that come into effect on 10 November 2023, the ACCC will be able to take court action to seek pecuniary penalties for breaches of the unfair contract term under law. And these penalties are massive, and we're talking about a maximum penalty of $50 million, or 3 times the value of the benefit derived from it, and then 30% of the company's turnover during the period it engaged in the conduct that was illegal. So Grain Producers SA, it's a peak body representing its 4,500 grain businesses in South Australia, and I think that's good news for those that are seeking particularly to land their fertiliser and make sure that it is of the quality that they intended for it, and ultimately that if a fertiliser company can't provide the supply, that they are still under contract to do so, and that is good news for farmers. Let's move to New South Wales, where the state's peak farm body, the New South Wales Farmers, has laid out a plan for government to resolve the acute shortage of large animal vets in the country. The New South Wales Farmers have given evidence to an inquiry into veterinary workforce shortages in New South Wales, highlighting the concern for the agriculture sector and putting forward 3 solutions that are being used internationally. Dr. Robin Alders, a qualified vet and farmer from the Upper Lachlan region, told the inquiry the relative decline in veterinary and other frontline personnel associated with animal health, welfare and biosecurity in rural areas had been presided over by governments of all types and needed a bipartisan approach to resolve. Farmers know that healthy animals, both terrestrial and aquatic, are productive animals, and it's in their best interest to care for their livestock, but there's also the bigger picture. And with the issue of outbreaks of foot and mouth disease and lumpy skin disease in Indonesia, and the detection and response rapidly, vets are going to be a crucial part of that at a local level. And they've put together a whole range of important initiatives, including student loan waivers to incentivise new candidates to practice and be part of the rural veterinary workforce after they complete their training. And that New South Wales farmers want to address this shortage. They put solutions like improving veterinary services in rural areas through greater partnership between the public and private sector, and also they've looked at approaches where they're hoping for workers who've been overseas to be brought back to Australia, cherry picking these, and particularly for the best solutions for our key issues here. And given the dire shortage of veterinarians in some rural areas, the New South Wales Government is being requested by the farmers to extend the engagement of private veterinary services to cover key functions such as disease investigation and preventative medicine activities. So this is an important time for increasing the veterinary workforce in our regional areas, and particular to look at biosecurity issues and the private sector being involved in that. And the Victorian Farmers Federation in Victoria reports that there should be no new taxes on farms. The VFF has expressed disappointment in the Victorian parliamentary inquiry into stamp duty. It's recommended that Victoria should introduce a new broad-based land tax. The VFF President Emma Germano said farmers want to see stamp duty reform but do not support any new taxes on farmland. And while the VFF acknowledges the need for tax reform, they've been a staunch advocate for the abolition of stamp duty. Removing this outdated tax is basically an important part to get young farmers back buying land, and the VFF has consistently said the replacement should not come in the form of a broad-based land tax that could be applied to primary production land. The VFF said they're pleased that with the evidence they've produced that the land tax on farmland is part of what's in the inquiry's report, that they say that it's important warning to the government over the negative consequences that would come from new tax on farms. And Emma Germano said the VFF's alternative plan would see stamp duty replaced through changes to federal taxation received through the support into the inquiry by the Victorian Government. I'm not sure that that's necessarily going to be the case, but I'm sure that there is a need for young farmers to get and buy blocks of land and to be able to start their farm, given the importance, I think, of decentralisation of farming rather than the corporatisation that we're seeing at the moment. But we'll have more news from our state bodies and across agriculture here at the Flow News Desk.
A Flow News 24 update.